our senior advisor for global affairs and national intelligence. Ric Grenell's with us. And Rick, I've got to start with, to get your reaction, there's a hearing today for a special master, which the judge indicated will be appointed. And I pointed out in my comments today that the government in its brief says, in one hand, they say, the review's complete. So there's nothing for a special master to do, which, by the way, isn't true because it's the question of due process. And then on the other hand, they say, don't appoint a special master. It's ongoing, our review. So, this is a typical government response these days. I hate to say that, but apparently that's how it's coming down. But to clear this up, I think a special master has to be put in place. I want to get your sense of that.
Well, I would say that a special master, as long as that person is independent, I fear that we have a whole group of Washington types that literally are fighting for their survival, their way of life, their rules. And that doesn't necessarily mean transparency will rule the day. We have a system in Washington that is threatened by anything on the outside that is going to change it, a force like Donald Trump. And so I would be nervous to see who is appointed. But I think the idea that we should be pushing is there should absolutely be a third-party, independent person who is not part of the swamp.
Hey, Rick, I wanted to bring up, obviously, you've spent the last few years really talking about what's been going on in California. Obviously, you're California local. But today, we've seen some pretty interesting stories come out. We had a few weeks ago, maybe even, not even that, you had the state of California say, hey, we're going to be ending the sales of new gas-powered vehicles in the coming years, just in a handful of years, maybe under 10 years. And then you have statements coming out today from Governor Newsom saying, hey, you obviously know you've been outside and it's hot, and that means you need to pause charging your EV, your electric vehicle. How is California reacting to hearing, kind of both sides of this, them talking out of both sides of their mouth, as usual?
Well, I will say that Chancellor Merkel and Gavin Newsom have one thing in common, and that is neither one of them have an energy plan or had an energy plan, and both of them also get glowing coverage from the media. So the scary part of what's happening in California is that we have no energy plan other than conserve, conserve, conserve. There's no desire to add to the supply. And yet from Sacramento all the way down to San Diego, the media are only talking in California about how to conserve, how to take your appliances and unplug them from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Think about this. The largest state in the country is having to unplug its appliances from 4 to 9 p.m. because we don't have enough energy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a third world country. You hear those kind of things. It really does. When you hear those things, we got to cut the power off at night, like you're going to Africa. I mean, that's a lot of those things happen there.
Yeah, but I mean, this idea that we're going to encourage no combustible engine in cars by 2035, but by the way, don't plug your electric car in right now because we don't have the power to do it. I mean, Rick, this is
shows you the door of what that could look like then in the future. Because if you are reliant on that, and then these kind of restrictions come, then you're almost in another lockdown situation of your own you can't control.
But is there any indication, Rick, that California's increasing its electric grid capacity to meet these kind of demands?
No, there's zero. And remember that Sacramento is totally a supermajority of Democrats. Republicans are not even an issue. They can't stop anything. Every statewide office is controlled by woke lefties. The media here do not vet our politicians when they go. Look no further than Kamala Harris, Javier Becerra. The disastrous people in the Biden administration are Californians. And yet our media here are screaming about conserve energy, conserve energy, conserve energy. Look, I'm no great economist, but when you look at supply and demand, you can't just lower demand and expect that to be a plan into the future when you're trying to get more electric vehicles on a grid. you've got to find supply. It's the same thing with water, Jay. We live on the ocean, but we're telling people to conserve water.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that's interesting. Look, I've had an electric car. I'll be honest. I don't have an electric car. I've had one pre-ordered for going on 3 years, I think now. Mainly because I like tech. I think it's cool. I think there's good stuff coming out, whether it's from Tesla or whether it's from the main GMC or whoever's creating them. I think that we can have improvements, but when you have these kind of situations, it begs all of us that even are just guys who like tech go, hey, hold on, maybe this is not the best thing for us. And like you said, then you have the water crisis, and we're seeing that like in Mississippi, where it's absurd what's happening in Mississippi. All over the country, it's starting. I mean, look, you don't want to be the person saying the sky is falling, but it does feel like things are crumbling from coast to coast.
I'll give you a sky is falling. Are the police cars going to be electric cars? Are they going to tell them only power up halfway? So I hope you don't have a high-speed chase.
I'm sure
your car runs out of battery. Yeah, I mean, just think about this for a minute. I do want to go to
that's
this,
how
Rick.
you defund the police.
We're getting calls on this, and I want to get your view on this. We'll take the call, or we'll take Tanya's call in just a moment here. And that is, the president is making a big speech tonight. And he used the phrase semi-fascist, which, as I said on air, I don't exactly know what a semi-fascist is, except he's calling basically conservatives and pro-lifers semi-fascists. What I don't understand about that is, a fascist is a fascist. That's a pretty horrible label. Was Mussolini a semi-fascist before the rise of Hitler? I thought he was a fascist. He became more of a fascist, more totalitarian in his approach, even after Hitler rose to power. But the language utilization here, Rick, coming out of the Biden White House is really unbelievable.
Yeah, and once again, we have a media largely ignoring what this guy is saying. It's very clear, and everybody knows, what the left is trying to do right now is shut down dissent. Dissenting comments, dissenting information, dissenting opinion are all considered a threat to the ruling party. And so what they're doing is across the board canceling or crushing anyone who doesn't share their line.
Okay, let's go ahead and take, I think this is a very important call coming in.
Quickly, let's go to Tanya, who's calling on line 6. You're on the air, Colorado.
I was wondering, with Biden saying, basically just threatening all the pretty much MAGA country with F-15s, what kind of legal actions can we take against that? That's not discussing options. That's a direct threat.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just worried about these labels that are happening. And she's referencing there was a speech given where talked about Second Amendment rights and said if you really believe the Second Amendment rights, that it's to go after your government to make sure that there's a check. Well, then you better be getting F-16s. That's what she's referring to in that.
His rhetoric.
But to say good luck is kind of what he was saying in that. But when it comes to the phrasing that's coming out of this and what we know may come from the speech, Dad, tonight. And Rick, it doesn't seem like it's going to be painting a picture of unity. That's for sure.
No, I mean, he's called people semi-fascists and then, ultra MAGA. So how do you see this playing out tonight, Rick?
Changed in 2 years.
Well, one thing that's clear is, we obviously don't want to be the ones who are saying that he have to change his rhetoric or change his, silence him in any way. I think what we have to do is demand transparency. And it's one of the things that ACLJ does really well, is to be able to be on the front lines of saying, wait, what does your rhetoric actually mean for policy issues? So when he's trying to go after Second Amendment supporters or pro-lifers, we need to be able to jump quickly to challenge him in the courts, to challenge him and hold the Biden administration accountable. And that's one thing that we do well. I'm somebody who, doesn't fear your comments, your First Amendment rights, your rhetoric.
No, I agree. But I mean, the tone of the great, uniter here is becoming the unbelievable divider.
Well, I told you, they threw out terms like, ultra MAGA and those kind of things that people were able to really rally themselves behind.
Right.
And they found one they couldn't, which was, obviously we're not all wearing shirts that say semi-fascist. So they're coming up with these terms to try to figure out what's that line, and it's pretty interesting.